The views expressed in this podcast are our own and do not constitute endorsement by the Department of Defense, Department of the Air Force, or the U.S. government. Bring us her triumphs, her challenges, her legacy. Bring Us Women, a podcast brought to you by Isabella Horning and Allie Clark.
Hey, Bring Us Women Squad. Today's guest is the Queen of Reinvention, USAFA Class of 1992, a 10-year Air Force vet, Vegas Resort Project Manager, KC Real Estate boss, CEO, and most importantly, a kick-ass mom who's done it all and keeps leveling up.
Meet Tina Roe, who proves you can rewrite your story over and over and still crush it every time. Tina, we're so glad you're here today on the Bring Us Women podcast.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I'm honored that you guys would want to talk with me and that we can just have a great visit and learn a lot more about each other and just have a fun time.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. So, we kind of want to start at the beginning and kind of hear what inspired you to first pursue a career in the military and even more specifically to attend the U.S. Air Force Academy.
Well, it's not like a story like maybe other people. I didn't have, I didn't grow up in a military family per se. My dad had a business convention out in Colorado Springs the summer before I think it was junior year or maybe senior year. I don't remember. It's been a long time ago. But he was out there at the Broadmoor and we did the big tour thing. We're like, hey, let's go check out the Air Force Academy. Let's take a tour. And I remember being up on the chapel wall and listening to the tour guide just talking about how difficult it was to get in there. And, the top 1% of people go here and it just sounded amazing. They were doing a new mill formation, which, when you've never seen that before, it just gives you chills when you actually see that from the chapel wall. And I remember going, man, I don't know if I could actually get into this place. And I had really great grades. I was on the gymnastics team. I was captain of my gymnastics team growing up. But I just really was like, man, she made it sound really hard. I don't know. When I went back home and my best friend told me that he was going to apply to the Naval Academy. And I was like, oh, well, if you can get in the Naval Academy, I can.
Challenge accepted.
Yes. So, because he played football, he had great grades, and and so it was just kind of that's how it went down. And the amazing thing about it is we actually both ended up going. He went to the Naval Academy, and I went to the Air Force Academy, and we had a running bet the entire 4 years that we were at school that if we won. Whichever school won the football game, that person had to buy the other person an article of clothing or, whatever. So I ended up with, let's see, Navy boxers, Navy sweatshirt, Navy sweatpants. So I'm sure that was not the highlight for him, but, it was kind of a cool competition thing. So that's actually between, just that little bit of competition. And then, of course, when I looked at it a little bit more closely, I was really looking for a college that gave me leadership skills. I wanted leadership training. I wanted management training. And I just really felt like that place was going to be able to bring those things out in me, whereas another college might not be able to do that quite to the same degree.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point on how that's such a unique, aspect of whether it's a service academy or even like ROTC, et cetera, that just normal college, like a lot of 18 to 22-year-olds aren't going to be responsible for all this, that, and another that the Service Academy gives you. And for you were also a D1 gymnast. You were balancing all these things. So kind of how was it like for you to juggle athletics, military training, that leadership stuff, and then also being in college and pursuing your academic major?
So I think it was really hard. And, I always tell people, in high school, pretty much everybody that ends up at the academy, they excelled in high school. So all these people are like, top of their class, whatever, just all these accolades and doing awesome. And then you go to school there and you're like, oh, I'm just average. I'm
very humbling.
Yeah. You're like, okay, this class is really hard. And, and I think being willing to understand your challenges and knowing, I got extra instruction every other day in electrical.
I was also an EI warrior, so I'm there with you.
I was like, oh, somebody, Lord, please help me. But, I think just learning to juggle and juggle a lot of stuff. And the first year obviously is really challenging and super hard for everybody. But I think for me, what I found is I needed sleep. And so I had to kind of revamp my way of living and studying and everything so that I went to bed. I mean, I could not do all-nighters. I needed sleep because I didn't function well in the classroom and I didn't function well in the gym. And, trying to do gymnastics on little sleep is probably also not very safe and not a good thing to do that way. So I think it's a learning experience and you just kind of learn I don't want to say your potential, but I mean, when you're kind of pushed to have to do a lot of stuff, you're either going to rise to that or you're going to rise to it. I mean, that place doesn't really give you a lot of options. You're going to have to rise to those challenges to get through that school.
That's kind of funny. Just today I had my planner out and I'm a planner. I live and die by my planner.
Me too.
And I'm like writing everything out and people are like, wow, how do you stay so on top of things? Like you're always the first one to send out the emails and stuff like that. And I'm like, the time management that we had to learn was you were down to the milliseconds with your schedule. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm much, much older than you guys, but I still have a paper planner. I have not switched over to, Google Calendar and all that stuff. I mean, I do have stuff on there, but it is my day to day. And it's kind of fun because now that my girls are grown, every once in a while I might pull one of those off my shelf because also I don't throw anything away. But, and I might pull it off and I'll be like, oh my gosh, look at this crazy, like when they were in school growing up and stuff, just, how much we got done. It's kind of astonishing sometimes to look at it like that.
Yeah, very true. Well, what was your major at the academy? I want to hear more about that.
So I was a management major. And again, I chose something that was leadership based, managing people. And I wasn't tall enough to fly. So back then we didn't have waivers for my height. So it was not ever going to be an option for me. I think today it probably could be an option, but so I knew that going in. And so I wanted to kind of position myself the best I could that no matter what career field I ended up in, that I would be learning how to manage people and how to, work through processes and be able to perform that way. So management just seemed like a perfect fit for me.
I've heard you talk about leadership a lot just in this brief time that we've been talking. And I want to know, was there a point at the academy that was kind of like this big, leadership aha moment, or were you just an event that you did or maybe a position that you held where you were like, yeah, this is either how I want to be as a leader or what I want to work to be as a leader, or maybe the opposite experience?
Yeah, I mean, I was captain of the gymnastics team while I was there. So, that was amazing. I think just the fact that a school like that gives you so many options and so many opportunities to practice leadership, and you get to see it. You get to see it not only from yourself, but you get to see other cadets doing things that maybe you don't like. And you kind of looking at it and going, gosh, I don't want to be like that when I grow up. And even like the AOCs that were in charge of the squadrons, seeing majors and lieutenant colonels that were, officers, 10 plus years into their career and seeing how they managed people, how they led people. And, it's always true. You learn more from people that maybe don't lead the way that you would lead, by the negative examples than you do sometimes from the positive. I mean, I can recall many positive leaders I've had in my past, but I think that's just such a great incubator of just practice, of being able to do stuff to where it's not somebody's life. It's not, it's not mission critical because you're going to school. I think lots of people can learn to be leaders if they listen, but there's also a lot of people out there that, they just think they're good leaders and they don't listen and they don't try to gain experience and get better. I mean, I just felt like I was always trying to learn and always get better and be the best leader that I could be, with all of the people and the people that I was responsible for.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like that's relatable. For Issa, at least, she was my leader when I was an underclassman. So those moments where I feel like it's like you're just showing up, you're doing the thing, you're trying to lead your people as best as possible. But for young girls in the military like me, young women in the military like me, that's like hugely important and like can really be career shaping. So I think that's super cool.
Yeah, because it's hard. I mean, it's hard to find people that are good role models that you look up to and, think of leadership skills.
Yeah, I feel like it's really cool for Allie and I to see because we talk about leadership a lot because I feel like that's honestly, at least in this day and age, maybe throughout history, I don't know, but the first thing that often like is neglected. Like people get caught up in their job or like caught up in, their family or whatever else they have to do, and they forget that like soft skill is oftentimes the most important, especially in the military.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because you graduate from there, and as a second lieutenant, all of a sudden, you've got an airman who is in debt because they're going to strip clubs or spending too much money here or there, and you're having to step in and be more
relatable
involved.
Experience.
Yeah, and you have to be more involved in people's lives than you would in the civilian world. And I mean, that's a special skill set to be able to handle that. And I would imagine today, with so much emphasis on mental health and things like that, there's even more going on than, back in my day where, we were kind of that generation of just suck it up, suck it up and keep moving forward, and you just deal with it, and things are a lot different now. So all of those things are really important. And the more experiences you can get and the more just different environments you can be in, the more you learn about not only yourself, but about the people around you.
Absolutely. Well, kind of transitioning into that second lieutenant life, post USAFA life, what AFSC were you? And then also what was like your first assignment like with that?
So I don't have really a normal thing going on. And the reason I'm going to tell you that is because when I graduated, it was 1992, and we had cutbacks. So a lot of people who were supposed to get pilot training spots did not get them. And so what happened is then everybody got put into this big pool, and lots of people that were going to go get pilot training positions then ended up in other non-rated career fields. So I originally got contracting, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a contracting officer. That was a class that I loved at the academy. I really enjoyed that. And I thought this would be good for me. Detail oriented. I like contracts. I like negotiating. I like all that stuff. So initially I interviewed and I was given that career field. And then when they cut the pilot training slots, they redid everything and it bumped me out of contracting. So
Oh.
I actually, and now that was devastating, I will tell you. And so I ended up in manpower, which they don't even really have that anymore. But I got stationed at Pete Field, Peterson Air Force Base right there in the Springs, which of course that was also devastating because I was supposed to go to Eglin Air Force Base and had shipped all my stuff to Florida. And while I was home on leave during my 60 days, I got notification that my assignment had been changed. And I was like, oh. So yeah, that was kind of my initial, kind of bummer deal. But, I went there, I learned my stuff. And then my husband, we had dated at the academy kind of the end of our junior year, senior year. And then he was stationed in Maine. And then he was going to be heading to Columbus Air Force Base for pilot training. And so we ended up getting married, and they let me switch from manpower into supply. So I went to Columbus Air Force Base, and I was a supply officer doing aircraft parts and fuel and all that stuff, oxygen, all that fun stuff. And I really enjoyed that. And then we left Columbus, went to Pope Air Force Base, and I was still doing that. And then after a couple years there, I did get picked up to be an executive officer to the vice wing commander. So while I was up there, my husband had been sent to do a remote to Korea, and they told him they wanted him to come back to Pope. And I'm like, well, that's all great and fine and dandy, but I've already been here for 3 years. And
You're ready to go explore. You're ready to get out of there.
yeah, and I'm like, how he's coming back here, and then what am I doing? And so they let me switch into the contracting career field. So I actually had 3 AFSCs during my time in the Air Force.
So you are really good at negotiating. You negotiated into this final
So
job.
I finally got, it took me, gosh, let's see, 98, so 6 years to get into the career field that I wanted to, but I finally got there, got all my certifications, contracting officer, and that really helped me because that did lead to what I ended up doing down the road in the future. But And it just kind of goes to show you when there's something that you want to do, you just got to keep at it. I mean, sometimes it takes people a short period of time, sometimes it takes you a long period of time. But if you think that's really what you want to do, just keep going, just keep figuring it out because eventually you'll get there.
I think that's so in line with just like how you've constantly reinvented yourself at all times of your life and made the most out of the cards you're dealt. Maybe not even made the most out of the cards you're dealt, but capitalized on the opportunities that you were given. And I think that's also a universal experience being the joint spouse and having to kind of charter your career off of your spouse's. And I think that's really cool that it's like, hey, you know what? Like your career is important. So is mine. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, what do we do in this situation? Do I just have to follow them wherever they go? And their career is in the limelight and mine is kind of off to the side. But I think that's a perfect example that, you're put where you're supposed to be. And no matter where you are, you can make it a very successful career.
Yes. And I think it goes to, you have to do a good job. I mean, you have to give everything that's put in front of you. You have to give it your best and you have to go, okay, yeah, maybe this isn't really what I want to do right now, but if I want other opportunities, I need to do well at it.
Well, we do know that you went on to do a lot of really cool things outside of the military. So what was it like and how did you decide to make that transition out of the military? And what was that transition like?
So for me and our family, it really boiled down to when we had our second daughter, or we were about to have our second daughter. My husband was gone a lot. He was an A-10 pilot. And when we were at Pope, he was gone over 200 days a year. It was a lot. Wow. And I was just like, okay, we already had one daughter and we were about to have another one. And I was just like, man, we need one stable parent. And so his commitment was 10 years. Mine was over at 5 and I was still in. So, I mean, I did 10 years. So I did 5 more than my commitment. But we just felt like it was the right thing to do because I didn't want to deploy. I didn't want to leave my children. And so I got out, and the first few months I'm like, okay, you know what, maybe I'm going to try this stay-at-home thing for a little bit. And that was not, that was not for me, and so then I started applying for jobs. And you guys will really appreciate this. So I applied to be the beer cart driver at Pinehurst Golf Course in North Carolina.
That sounds like an awesome job.
Yeah, I'm like, this is going to be so fun. Like, no stress. I'm just going to be selling beer on the golf cart. I'm going to get great tips. And they called me and they're like, yeah, no, but do you want to run our transportation department? And I was like, oh.
Maybe a little bit overqualified.
Yeah. I was like, no. So I didn't take the job because it was going to be weekends, holidays, just anytime they had anything going on at the golf course. So after several months, I was like, okay, time for me I need to go back to work. This just is not my personality. And so they had a position open up in the contracting squadron. So I essentially just changed my clothes, put on civilian clothes, went back to work. And then maybe about, I guess it was maybe 6 months to a year, somewhere in there. I have to look up the dates, but my husband got orders to Nellis. And so we moved to Nellis. I ran the construction contracting program at Nellis Air Force Base, one of the biggest jobs I've ever had as far as just massive amount of projects, $100 million deals. I mean, it was a pretty big deal there. But then I just got to a place where I was like, man, I am not going to get promoted unless somebody dies or retires. So what is this? And I was like, I don't like this. And so my husband was playing hockey with a guy that was the chief operations officer for Wynn Las Vegas. And so he happened to see him at hockey and said, hey, are you hiring? And he's like, no, do you want a job? And he's like, no, but my wife is looking. And so he's like, have her send me her resume. So I sent my resume over. I interviewed with the vice president of the hotel side and with the construction side. And I got hired by the construction side. And that started my project management time, opening Wynn Las Vegas, Wynn Encore, the MGM City Center with Aria, Vidara, and Mandarin Oriental, and then I also opened the Cosmopolitan. And I will say, out of all of my job stuff, I mean, I love the military, and if I could have done the 20 years and it would not have impacted my family the way that I felt like it would have, I would have loved to have finished in the military and retired. I really would have. But opening those resorts was, I mean, it was just so fun. It was stressful, but it was exciting. It was busy. You know, we were opening Wynn Las Vegas, so my very first resort. And I remember, and I was responsible for everything that you see in a hotel, getting into the hotel. So
I couldn't imagine.
Every table in a restaurant, every chair, every piece of artwork. I mean, just everything you can think of. I was responsible for getting that into the building before it opened. And I would have to schedule and organize, okay, this venue is construction complete. And so I'd have to work with the construction team on when it's ready, and then with the installation company when it's coming in, and then the purchasing department to make sure we had everything there. And then the interior designers wanted me to set up when we had to hang stuff and when we had to place things. I mean, it was just so much coordination and just totally up my alley.
So what we're hearing is that your planner was full.
Yes, it was. Oh my goodness. And the coolest story I have, though, that I will share with you guys is there was one night, and we were loading in Bartolotta. It's the Italian restaurant in Wynn Las Vegas, and we had these huge oil jars that had been boated over from Italy. And Roger Thomas, the interior designer, the head interior designer, I mean, Steve Wynn did everything with him, but he had picked them out special. He had gone to Italy. They had spent months on a boat coming over, and it was the night we were going to put them in before the staircase went in, the rail on the stair rail, and they were going down into the bottom part of the restaurant. So it's probably 11 p.m. or so, and we're loading those in, and Steve Wynn comes walking up, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we are loading in the oil jars for the restaurant. These are what Roger Thomas picked out," you know, because I was kind of a little bit panicked. I hadn't really met him before. And he's like, "Well, I don't know if I like those."
Oh,
and
sassy.
Silence, you know. I'm like, "Oh, okay. Let me see if I can get Roger on the phone." So, you know, I try to get Roger on the phone, and, you know, it's late at night. I'm sure Roger was asleep, because most of the interior designers that I worked with, I love them dearly, but they were not night owls, you know. They were. Yeah. So nobody answered, and I was like, "Oh." So the other chief executive officer was there, and Andrew, and he's like, let's just let her get these loaded in. Let's see what we think about it. And so Steve Wynn ended up coming and sitting with me. We sat in the bottom of that restaurant for 3 hours watching those big oil jars being loaded in. And then after they were all loaded in, he's like, "You're right. These look great." And I got home at like 3:00 in the morning, and my husband's like, "What have you been doing?"
You were like, "Hey, even if it doesn't look right, we're not doing that 3-hour process again. Sorry, sir."
No. And it was funny the next morning, you know, because I was home, and then probably by 8:00 the next morning, I was back over there, because it was ridiculous hours. And I saw his then wife, Elaine Wynn, and she was like, "Hey," she's like, "So Steve got home really late last night, and I asked him, you know, what he was doing, and he's like, 'Oh, well, I was with Tina Roe.'" And I was like,
bad answer. Bad answer.
I was like, "No." And she goes, "You know," and I said, "Oh yeah, we were loading the oil jars in Bartolotta, blah blah blah." And she's like, "He said that was the most fun he had since he took the roof off the Golden Nugget."
That is so cool.
And I was like, pretty cool. So it was awesome, you know. And from that point on, you know, I had a great relationship with both of them as owners, and like I said, it's just a wild experience. I mean, I was in the MGM City Center. I was walking 14 miles a day. You know,
love getting our steps in.
So you left the military to avoid deployment, to then be practically deployed to the Las Vegas Strip.
Yes, that is so true. Well, and you know, and the funny thing is that actually then led to, after several years of that, you know, I was tired. We had then moved to Kansas City, and then I was traveling back and forth to open up those projects, and it was 80, 100-hour weeks, and I just felt like my girls really needed their mom. And, you know, they were getting of that age where it was just getting harder for me to travel like that. And so I was like, "Oh, okay, what's the next thing that I could do that would give me flexibility, you know, unlimited income, something that I enjoy?" And, you know, there happened real estate. So, you know, it's always interesting when you just kind of see how one thing kind of leads to another. And like I said, sometimes you just got to follow the road, even though you're not really sure at that moment kind of what's going to happen. And, you know, when you stay on that road till it works, or you get to where you're like, "You know what, this isn't working anymore, and I'm ready to do something else."
Yeah, I feel like that's a theme that Allie and I have been seeing, because I feel like at least maybe it's just like how the academy talks to us, or like when you're in the military, it's like you're either in the military doing your job or you're not. And that must mean that you're like sitting at home, retired, doing nothing, or, not that it's a bad thing, but being a stay-at-home mom and things like that. But really, you can get out of the military and that just opens doors that you didn't even imagine for yourself. Like, I'm sure maybe first year Tina Roe didn't think she'd be, sitting in the Wynn Las Vegas with Mr. Wynn himself, but because of all those experiences that you had and just, working hard throughout the years, those doors opened, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it just always goes to show you that, work hard, do a good job, be a positive person, and, put positive energy out into the world, and, good things happen. I mean, we are what we think about, and that really is true. And if you just do good things and you hope, that you'll see that at some point, sometimes, there's hard dips in there where you're like, oh my God, what am I doing right now? But I think just continuously, showing up and doing the job that you were hired to do.
Yeah, I feel like it's, even right now, Allie and I are both on our first assignments, and at least for me, like, I'm like stressed every single day. Not because of the job I'm doing or anything like that, but I'm just in the mindset of like, okay, how is this job going to prepare me for the next assignment that I'm going to have to do, and then prepare me for getting out of the military? What if I'm not prepared? How am I going to get a job? All these things, which maybe not everyone's thinking about, but that's what keeps me up at night.
Isabella, I'm gonna tell you, you got to just kind of zen it out a little bit. I mean, just zen it out a little.
Write that down.
Yes. I mean, I think it's awesome that you're thinking about those things, but I think don't get so much in your head about it, because the right things will work if you're doing the right things. I mean, you end up in the right places. I mean, like, what are the chances my husband was playing hockey, seriously, with a guy that was in a position to be able to review my resume and get me an interview? I mean, if he hadn't played hockey with Rob, I don't know that I would have got that interview. I mean, because I didn't have in anywhere. I mean, and I just think, like I said, you just have to go through and just keep doing and and trust that things will show up in the right way at the right time, and try not to get caught up in the, worrying about it like that, and thinking so much about it, and just constantly just make sure you're improving yourself, right? And that you're building your skill set. And I'm not saying don't think about it, because you should think about it, but, don't think so much about it that it makes it stressful, because I don't want you to have that much stress, for your first assignment. You still got a ways to go.
I just saw the weight lift off of her shoulders.
You got a ways to go. Oh my gosh. And I mean, and it is hard, I mean, I look back right now and I'm like, man, my life could have gone so many different ways. I mean, we had an opportunity to stay in Vegas, both my husband and I, and with what I had done there. And we made a different choice, and we made that choice for our daughters, So, and sometimes I'm like, oh, what would that have done? I don't know, maybe I would have seen more money, who knows? But what also maybe would have been the end result with our daughters? I mean, I don't know. And I try hard not to just what if stuff so much, because I think with all of us in the military, you're a chameleon. I mean, you're constantly changing, and they expect you to do whatever job it is they give you to do, whether you wanted to do it or you didn't, right? And you have to figure it out.
I love your family-oriented mindset. I want to hear more about your girls, and after all this good advice that you're giving us, I can only imagine what they're up to these days.
Oh,
so can you talk more about them?
They're probably like my crazy mom. Oh my gosh. So let's see, we have two daughters, and they are both amazing. One of them is, she went to college, got a degree in communication, started working at a hotel, and did not really enjoy that very much. So now she is an amazing nail technician. She does all this crazy art, and she's 2, sometimes 4 weeks booked out. So
That's awesome.
she's sometimes hard to get into. She's making great, like great money. And she's right now getting her certification to be a permanent makeup artist. So, so she's working on that. And,
Nice.
someday I'm sure that she will have her own salon, because that's things we talk about is, setting yourself up for, what's your future? So Isabel, to your point, yes, it is good to think about that stuff, but you just don't want to get bogged down in necessarily all the details, because the details will kind of work themselves out as you go. But, we spent a lot of time with her talking about, learning and watching the salon that she's in, watching how that how that owner operates, and taking ideas and things like that. So she's doing amazing. And then our other daughter we're moving her to Denver to start
exciting.
She's going to start grad school next month at the University of Denver, and she is going to be a counselor. And she specifically wants to counsel athletes who not necessarily are looking for performance aid, like, oh, I can't score or whatever, but more of the, hey, I am an athlete, but I deal with a lot of anxiety, or I'm dealing with OCD, I, have trouble driving, or I, wash my hands a lot, or, just different things that are impacting them, but they're not necessarily impacting them on the field, like in your face on the field, because ultimately all of that impacts you on the field, but some of it's not going to be as glaring as other things. So yeah, we're super proud of both of them. And I'm sure sometimes between my husband and myself, I'm sure there's times they're like, oh, my parents, some of the boys that come over, they're like fangirling over their dad, my husband. So, they're just like, oh, A-10 pilot, so cool. And, all of that. So it just kind of makes me laugh. I'm like, oh, sometimes I'm sure they're just like, really, can we just have normal parents?
No, you guys are cool parents. That's much better.
I'd like to think that we were cool. So, and I'm sure we had moments of being cool and probably some moments of not so cool.
Well, we know you started a company called Sports Hogs. You were just talking about your daughter wanting to be a counselor and helping athletes. And I think like those kind of go hand in hand. Did they play a role off of each other at all?
So yeah, I've been doing real estate for almost 14 years now, and just looking to pick up a little side thing, because that's kind of the way I roll, just in my, ready to feel like want to do something else that's challenging and, that could be successful. And so my daughter, we were all talking, and, sports is a pretty big thing in our family. Both of our daughters played lacrosse in college. My husband obviously played hockey at the academy, and then I did gymnastics. And we were just kind of talking about different things and, like what we would want to do. And she and I were talking about journaling, and she had shared with me that pretty much her entire journal from probably like high school and college was negative. It was, I should have, I could have, I didn't do this, I need to do this. It was just mostly negative. And I just feel like in today's world, so many kids aren't going to go on to college. They're not going to be national champions. I mean, if you think about how many people in the world are national champions, like very few, but yet everybody's trying for that. So there's a lot of disappointment and a lot of work that you put into the sports that you might not ever be number one. You might train for 10 years and never finish number one. And so we just kind of talked about, what could we do to help both coaches and athletes with, learning to be more confident, being able to look back over a season and go, you know what? I didn't think it was a great season, but when I look back at my journal and the things that are in here, I actually had a really good season. I actually did something well, because all of those skills that you can learn in high school, maybe a top middle schooler and even college, those things will suit you well when you go off into the real world and
Absolutely.
You're looking at a job and how you perform there. It's the goal setting. It's the being able to pull good things out of your performance rather than all the negative. So yeah, it's kind of been a family affair. Just she does go with us, when we go to conventions and things like that, she'll go with. And so it'll be kind of a bummer because she's going to be off in school for a little bit. But I'm kind of looking forward to, maybe there's a possibility to pull her back into the fold on the counseling piece of it somehow into the business. And, I'm still trying to kind of press that around in my brain and figure out, how we could do something with that would help people, because that's really what it boils down to, is just helping coaches and athletes just feel good about themselves when it's all said and done at the end of the day.
I feel like that's really cool, and something that would be very helpful, because I mean, like you said, most people are super negative about everything, and it's, not everything's going to be good, whether that's on the field or in your job or anything like that, but if you can learn something from it, that's how you're gonna, bring those skills or that experience to the next thing and the next thing. So I think that's really cool what you're doing.
Yeah, well, thank you. Like I said, we're enjoying it, and just getting the word out into the world, and it's a big learning curve, because when you try to do a business like that, you're the marketing person, you're the the financial advisor, you're the the legal person, you're the warehousing person. I mean, you're every position that a company, many companies have thousands of employees doing, and you're doing it all. So it's been fun, but like I said, it's hard for me to just sit still sometimes. I like to keep things going, and just kind of it maybe it's a little bit of my creative side as well, so that part's a little bit cool. I've got a book that's going to be coming out, kind of how to master your mindset for the athletes, so trying to get that finished up and get that out into the world as well. And like I said, biggest goal is just to help other people through that, because again, in the end, we're not all going to end up being number one, but being number 2, being number 10, I mean, there's some amazing things you can do in your life just having worked hard and set goals and learned how to change things up, how to adjust, how to make things work. And that's exciting to me.
Well, kind of along that same mindset or train of thought, do you have any advice for someone who might be wanting to start their own business, or even just like start a side project or anything like that? And what it's like juggling, or even just being afraid, like, maybe if I start this thing, it'll fail. Because I know, like, Allie and I have even talked about that with this podcast. Like, we've, interviewed all these really incredible women, and then, maybe it'll be all for nothing. But, what's that fear like? Or, how do you overcome that when you want to start something new?
Yeah, but I mean, think about it, even like for you guys, even if you just take one nugget from each of those people that you interview, and it changes your life, and maybe you share that with someone else and you change somebody else's life, then it was a success. I mean, I think how we define success is different for everybody. And, sometimes, yes, it's maybe financial, but sometimes it's just, making a difference in one kid's life. For example, like, we have a softball coach that uses our journals with her softball team. And she was sharing with me that one of her high school girls on the the positive self-talk page wrote, "I'm not an idiot." And I was like, oh, that's not an affirmation. And I'm like, now you coach, you have the information that somewhere in that girl's life, somebody's telling her she's an idiot, whether it's her peer, family. I mean, you don't know where it's coming from, but somebody's telling her and making her feel that way. And I'm like, now think of the impact that you can have on that one girl. And so she changed how she coaches her, how she speaks to her. And I'm like, that's a win. I mean, that's a win. That's a win for me. I mean, that's a win for her, but it's a win for me, because through someone else, I'm making a difference to, we are making a difference to somebody else out there. So I think you have to look at it in lots of different ways. And I'm a try and fail kind of person. I mean, I've tried lots of businesses and lots of different things over the years, and it's okay, because you will never know if you don't try. And I think that's kind of the bigger thing is trying. And then obviously there's some points where you get to where you're like, okay, I've been doing this, I need to be making this money. I'm not. Maybe you're losing money. And, sometimes there comes a point where that loss is too great, and you do have to step back and say, you know what, I'm going to pivot. And I would say it's more of a pivot versus a failure, because you may, like, when I started Sports Hogs, it actually started out as a soap business, if you can believe that. And it was with my other daughter.
Soap to mindset.
Yes. And so we had been making soap and candles, and then my daughter got busy with her job, and she's like, checking out. See you later. I'm like, well, wait a minute. We were supposed to do this together. And then I was like, okay, I like the soap and candles, but it's not really something that speaks to me, like I wasn't passionate about it that way. And so then my other daughter happened to be home finishing her senior year online. And I was like, hey, what do you think about this? And then I just started throwing ideas out. And so I pivoted, and initially when I had leftover product, I sold them as like sweet shot soap or, the grind soap, and I kind of changed them to athletic, cool names, and then eventually, all of that was gone. And now I'm, just with the journals. But I think it's more about the pivot than it is the failure, because even if you close a business and you decide to go do something else, it's the pivot to something else. And to me, the pivot is positive.
Isa, the pivot.
I'm writing it down. I wrote it down.
And Isabella, right, the pivot is positive. So, and like I said, you know what, it is scary doing something new. The other thing I would do is reach out to mentors. I mean, I have taken a lot of classes. I have signed up for a lot of training. I have learned a lot. I mean, I can tell you what a funnel is. I can tell you about Facebook ads. I can tell you about Shopify. I mean, reach out to the people who have successful businesses, find people to help you do that, because it is a lot, and ask for help. I mean, that's really the big thing. I mean, you don't have to do it alone. Ask for help from people, find accountability partners. I've met a lot of great people through all the classes and different things. And I've learned a lot about myself, of the things that I enjoy doing, and the things I do not want to do.
That's super cool. I also love, just to take it back to what you said about like changing the way you lead based off of like the person that you're leading and getting that like general understanding of that. I think just that part is so important to like the military in general and the military construct, because me and Isa talk about it a lot, about using the one size fits all approach with everybody that you lead. But, just taking that into consideration, like getting to know people on a deeper level, their mindset, what drives them, can really change the type of leader that you are for them and the type of things that they go on to do with their sports career, their military career, etc. So I really like that you said that.
Yeah, because, Allie, to take it a little further, like when I was running a real estate team, when I co-led a team, and I handled a lot of the team training and that aspect of it. And, we had like daily success habits, and, you earned points. Well, you're trying to set up, hey, if you earn so many points, this is what you get. But if you don't know what's important to your people, then it doesn't, it's a moot point, because that's not driving them, learning to motivate them, because you can't motivate people if you don't know what it is that matters to them. And similarly to the journal, there's a place in there where we're asking the kids to say, why do I play soccer? Why do I swim? Why do I do this? Because if you're a coach and you're running a team and half your players are only playing because their best friend is playing, or they're only playing because their parents are making them play, that's a different team than if you have half your team made up of kids that are like, I want to get a college scholarship.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out how to reach them all, because you can't motivate them all the same. It's not going to be the same. And that is the same in the military as well, because not everybody's going to stay in for 20 years. Some people are coming in, they're getting their education, they're getting their skills, and they don't want to stay in. They want to do something else, but you want to help them be as successful as they can be for whatever period of time that you're working with them, or that you're helping them, or you're leading them. How can you help them to be the most successful in that, so that then they set themselves up for success further on in life with other things that they want to do.
Yeah. And also setting them up for some of those possible things that they could do after as well. Just like all of the ones that you've mentioned here today,
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. There's just so much. Like, the world is just full of so much stuff. Oh my gosh. And you guys are just getting started. I mean, I look back and I'm like, holy cow. I mean, it was so long. some days it like I blink and I'm like, oh, it was yesterday. And then and then there's other times I'm like, whoa, a lot has happened between, when I walked out those doors in 1992 and today. And it's been a great journey. And like, we are so super blessed with just between my husband and I, between the two of us, we've just gotten to do some amazing things that never in my wildest dreams would I've thought we would have been invited to do, gotten to do. Like my husband got to go to the Field of Dreams game, and they did the flyby for the very first Field of Dreams game. He got to be on that field. I mean, just stuff like that, being at football games and soccer games and the racetrack. And we got to go to the Top Gun Maverick movie, in downtown Kansas City when it was put out. I mean, just so many really cool experiences, all the openings that we got to go to before those resorts opened to the public. We got to go and experience those. And, that's a surreal environment because, I'm walking around those resorts, and once those doors open to the public, they never close again until they're going to demolish the place. So if you think about it, it's never going to be quiet in there ever, ever again. And to just be in there when it's just quiet. I mean, it's just such a surreal experience, with some of those things. And just to, there's so much to life, and there's just so many different ways that you can have a great life. And, it doesn't have to always be about money. It doesn't always have to be about the biggest job. I mean, in the end, it's being kind, it's being respectful, it's being positive, and it's uplifting other people and, helping other people do things that they want to do and helping people be successful.
I couldn't agree more.
And I'm excited for you guys. Like I said, you're on the very beginning and you have your whole lives ahead of you. And I know you're going to do great things with that.
Well, we know that, you have your daughter who's working, the other one's in college or graduate school. So what are some things now that you and your husband get to do together, maybe now that you're more of like the retired or not working as much, kind of being able to lean into more of like your passions and hobbies? What do you guys enjoy doing?
So we love to travel, and I've been traveling with our youngest daughter while she's been in her little gap year before she started school. So we went to Paris, we went to Rome. My husband and I just got back from a fishing trip in Canada, which he was like, oh, if I'd have known you to go fishing, we'd have been doing this for 30 years. But it was totally fun. I mean, we caught walleye. It was a great trip. We're going to Costa Rica next year on a fishing trip with some other grads that we're friends with. So just traveling. And I think for me, the biggest thing is just taking a chill pill, and going, okay, you've worked really hard because I've worked a lot of hours and I've been burning it on both ends in many different career fields, real estate the same way, where you're just nonstop run. And now I really try hard that, when he's home from his job, and he wants to go get a cup of coffee or he wants to go grab lunch, you know what? I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to go. And, and I think 10 years earlier, that was really hard for me to do. And now I'm really working hard on going, you know what? I'm really going to enjoy that moment. And if we're going to go for a car ride, we told our daughter the other day, we're like, hey, we're going to go out for a ride. And we ended up being gone for like 3 hours. We went to like where Jesse James was buried or something. We went through this little log cabin museum and, just really taking time to enjoy that. I'll go over, we do apartment night at my daughter's apartment where we go over and have dinner and hang out with her and her cats. And, and I know our poor daughter that's going to Colorado, she realizes that now she has opened the door that we are going to be just a little, close to the academy, that we may be popping in for some Air Force hockey games and some things like that. So she knows we're going to be, popping in to see her. But I think just really just enjoying ourselves and trying to spend, good quality time, because we didn't always have that over all these years between his deployments. I think we figured out in his 31 years of career, he was gone for probably about 8 years when you look at all the deployments and how that adds up. I mean, it's a lot. And then me traveling for those several years that I was traveling. And then, with real estate, yeah, it's flexible. But, if somebody wants to see a house at 7 p.m. you're going, and now you're not home for dinner because you're showing houses, or you're gone all day Saturday because somebody needs to see 10 houses. So I think now we're just kind of taking a little bit more of a step back and going, you know what, let's enjoy where we are and spend time with each other and spend time with our family.
I think that's the whole purpose. You work hard your whole life, and for you worked hard, girl. You deserve a break. You deserve to have time with your kids, your husband, and we're excited for you. We're excited for you to finally get to enjoy all of that. So
I appreciate that.
Well, kind of wrapping up our interview, we have gotten to our last question, which we want to hear from all our guests, kind of like, basically, what do they want their legacy to be? So for you, what do you want your legacy to be?
I think for me, the biggest legacy and what would mean the most to me is I just want people to remember me as a kind person, a generous person, and somebody that always tried to help other people. I mean, that's really what I want my legacy to be. And I hope that my girls will, see those things, and when they see someone that they can help or do something kind for, that they do it. And kind doesn't mean getting walked on, but we should be kind to each other, and we are all human, and everybody deserves that. But I would say those are probably my biggest things. I just want to be remembered as a kind, generous, helpful person.
I love that, especially because those things don't need to come necessarily in like grand gestures. You can be kind by just, saying hi to someone, or, little things like that. And I think, more people need to lean into that.
Absolutely.
Well, that kind of closes us out. We really appreciate you spending an hour with us.
You are so welcome. And again, I am so honored that you guys reached out and said, hey, we'd love to have you on the podcast. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to just share with me. And I hope that, like I said, maybe just one little nugget you can take from my life that, you can maybe apply to yours, that will bring you just amazing, good feelings and happiness.
Thank you for joining us on the Bring Us Women podcast. After hearing Tina Roe's story of reinvention, from Air Force Academy gymnast to 10-year Air Force veteran, Vegas resort project manager, real estate leader, and CEO, I hope you're inspired to embrace every season of your life with courage, curiosity, and a relentless drive to learn. Whether your pivot is big or small, remember that the pivot is positive and mastering your mindset is key. Be sure to check out our Instagram for bonus content from today's episode. Until next time, be bold, keep leading, and we can't wait to bring you the next woman. The views expressed in this podcast are our own and do not constitute endorsement by the Department of Defense, Department of the Air Force, or the U.S. government.